All right, everyone, week 7, we've got 2 weeks left. Your earth sculptures from last week are graded in the grade book. Really nice job on those. I love seeing you guys get outside, get out from behind that computer, and talk about how artists like Goldsworthy, have changed your perspective or didn't. You already kind of really understood what these types of artists were doing, but everyone usually has a really positive experience with that project. So I'm glad that you enjoyed that. Your film reviews, be looking for those by Friday. I'll have those done and back to you. And remember that if you are going to do that extra credit assignment, the one about Stephen Shore and Heterotopias, that needs to be done by this Friday. So moving into week 7, we're talking about art in the church this week. And this week, your workload is very light. You only actually have one assignment that is due. And the reason is because I want to make sure you have a lot of time to work on your capstone project, which we will talk about in just a minute. So that way you've got that pretty much 2 weeks to get this done and really focus on that. So I have high expectations for those because I give you a lot of room to work on that. Okay. So your reading this week is going to be your reading for that capstone project. So you're going to be finally reading that Francis Schaeffer text, Art in the Bible. There's 2 essays, so it's basically in 2 parts. You only need to read the Some Reflections on Art for this assignment. So we have a discussion board due, and then we want to start work on that project. No quiz this week. Okay, so your discussion board is going to be about an artist named Makoto Fujimura. And I've given you 2 quick clips about 2 of his different exhibitions, Golden Sea and 4 Holy Gospels, that he's an abstract artist, contemporary artist who is also a Christian. He's founded a really cool organization called the I Am Movement that is all about, kind of venerating Christian subject matter in art and kind of getting people of faith to start engaging with more contemporary art and thinking outside the box a little bit. It's a really cool organization, and he's a really interesting guy. He's one of the few contemporary Christian artists who's been able to kind of cross boundaries from that quote unquote Christian art world into the broader art world. Very talented guy. So what I'd like you to do is watch those 2 clips, and then you can explore his website here. And these 2 clips are actually found there. Here's one of them actually, and they're both short. They're both under 10 minutes. This one's 6 minutes. I think the other one's only about 8 minutes or so. So go ahead and watch these. Browse through his website here, so you can go ahead and take a look at his bio, read about who he is, what he's done. Definitely take a look at his works, and you can browse through his different series that he's done. Here's the 4 Holy Gospel front pieces that he did. This is one of my favorite series that he has done. And, just spend some time looking at his writings. He's just a really interesting, captivating character. And what I want you to consider is this quote from Francis Schaeffer. As a Christian, we know why a work of art has value. Why? First, because a work of art is a work of creativity, and creativity has value because God is the creator. So he is the one that gave us this gift of creativity. So there's this argument that creating in general is almost like an act of worship, because we're using those gifts and talents that God has given us, and so we're actually worshiping him through that. So how can we apply this quote to the work of Makoto Fujimura? Question 2, does an artist like Fujimura change your perspective on quote unquote Christian art? Why or why not? And there's this argument here. A lot of Christian artists are dealing with this whole fact of transparency in their artwork. And when I say transparency, what I mean is that, this idea that people expect that the themes of the work, the subject matter, should be very transparent. They should be very clear cut. If you're painting a picture of Jesus on the cross, or you're painting something, that's about the crucifixion, it's going to be a painting of Jesus on the cross. And if you're going to paint something about a biblical narrative, then it's going to be very cut and dry and very clear. Where a lot of these artists are saying, these subjects of, humanity and grace and the whole concept of God are really complex, right? And that they're not easily understood sometimes, and that we can engage in these subject matters in really unique ways and portray them in really interesting ways. And that's one of the things that Fujimura likes to do. So, consider that and what you expect from quote unquote Christian art, and whether or not this kind of changes the way you feel about that. Number 3, what is the job of a Christian artist? That kind of goes along with what we were just talking about. So give evidence from Schaeffer here. And then make sure that you comment on at least one of your peers' posts. Remember, in these discussion boards, you do not get full credit unless you are participating together. So you might ask them, do you like Fujimura's work? Why or why not? Something they said in that discussion board you may have found you agree with or don't agree with, and you want to comment there. Okay, so then I have to begin work on your capstone project. And if you go into the week 8 learning activities, that is where you will find that assignment. But I've gone ahead and downloaded the PDF so that we can kind of walk through that this week together. And that way you have, all of this week and next week to ask any questions you might have about how this assignment is going to work. So Francis Schaeffer, he passed away nearly 30 years ago. His text, Art in the Bible, remains a very powerful and relative piece of discussing contemporary art in the Christian world. So after you've read some perspectives on art, this is going to be a 10 to 12 page paper. And you are to complete 3 individual case studies for this. So when you read Schaeffer, this is all going to make a lot more sense, but basically he goes through 11 different perspectives on how we can look at Christian art, or art from a Christian perspective, art that is secular, and look at it from a Christian perspective and apply meaning and know how to engage with it, how to separate our taste from, meaning, how to look at different worldviews and consider how we can then not only apply meaning, but understand how to pray for people, how to engage with the world and the state it's in, etc. Because I always think that art is very much a temperature gauge of culture and what's going on in the world. So I'm not going to walk through all of these because you're going to read through that. But basically, for this paper, you are going to pick 3 of these to write about. So each one will be its own case study. And if you are wondering what a case study is, I've actually broken my own rules about Wikipedia, and I've given you the Wikipedia link to a case study. So this is basically a research method involving an up-close, in-depth, and detailed examination of a subject of study, as well as related contextual conditions. So the contextual conditions that you are going to be using here, let me get back, where are we? Oh, I gotta go back this way, okay. The contextual conditions you are going to be applying to the 3 perspectives you choose is a work of art. So, once you have selected your 3 perspectives you would like to write about, begin to research artists and works of art that illustrate these perspectives. Your chosen artist must be from the 20th or 21st century because we are contemporary visual arts and culture after all. These artists do not need to be Christian artists, and I've given you some sources to consider browsing to find your artworks. So that's what I mean by a case study. You're going to take one of these perspectives. So say you take number 1, a work of art has value in itself, and you're going to use a work of art as a contextual condition for us to understand this perspective, okay? So that we're going to use that to prove what Schaeffer is saying, in other words. Or if you find something antithetical, if you don't agree with what he's saying and you want to find a work of art that proves otherwise, you can do that as well. So each case study must include the following: an introduction to the perspective being studied. So you want to include it as a direct quote from the text. You can do this as a subtitle. You can do this within that kind of intro to the case study. This is where you will tell your reader why Schaeffer believed this perspective to be true. Use supporting evidence from both the text and outside sources. You might want to research how other scholars and theologians have interpreted this perspective. Okay, next you want an introduction to the image used for the case study. Think of your reader as being someone who has never seen this image before. what is important for them to understand about this artist or this image. So to help you with that, you're going to use Panofsky's intrinsic level to give your reader context to the image. Notice I just said Panofsky's intrinsic level. We don't need to walk through all of Panofsky, okay? Don't waste your words going through that primary and conventional level. You can kind of sum that up in this part, in this section here. But here is where, I want you to give us that context, because that's going to help us understand, because that's the looking outside the picture frame part, right? That's going to help us understand how this really applies to Schaefer. So why was this image created? What does it mean for the artist who created it? Include outside research here to validate your claims. The image being discussed needs to be included in the paper. I know that seems obvious, but every time I teach this class, there are students who just don't even include the images that they're writing about. So I want you to include the image captioned with the full image citation, which you should know very well how to do right now: artist name, title of work, year created, medium, full web source. Okay, we want an assessment of how this image is a good example of the perspective being discussed. This is the culminating point of your case study. This is that aha moment. Don't overlook it. Include supporting evidence from the text and any appropriate outside sources to support your position. So again, this is what all of this is leading up to, is this point here. And then we want to include a personal reflection on why you find this artwork powerful or thought-provoking. So here and here only is it appropriate for you to use first-person narrative voice, I, me, my. So it is important in the formatting that you think about how you're going to break up those individual sections. So before I get into that, I skipped over this one. So I want to see a minimum of 3 outside sources for each of your case studies. So one of those can be Schaefer's text per case study. So that means that if you have 3 case studies, that's 9 sources total, right? Well, one of those for each could be Schaefer. So that means 2 more sources for each case study need to be included for a total of 7 unique sources minimum. Does that make sense? Because you'd have two unique sources for each plus Schaefer for each. Okay. You may want to explore art journals, museum websites, or news sources for your other sources. JSTOR is a great resource. It's a great data bank of journals and articles for you, and that can be found through our library's website. You can log into JSTOR through that. Okay, so formatting. Your paper should be formatted according to either MLA or APA standards. I've included the MLA and APA style guides here. Images, please no smaller than 4 inches in size on your paper. Students will give me these teeny little like thumbnail size images, which I might as well just go and look up the image on my own because it's really hard to see what's going on in the detail. So I want decent size images. However, that does not, I don't count images in your page count of your writing, right? So I want 10 to 12 pages of text, and then you add your images in, okay? So your paper should include a strong introductory paragraph followed by the 3 case studies formatted with subtitles. This is really important. It helps your reader to break up these ideas, to follow along with you in a more cohesive manner. I even think that it's wise within each case study to give subtitles as well. Okay, make sure you end with a strong conclusion paragraph. It's amazing how often students will just skip over this part, that they'll just end with that 3rd case study and not sum up the ideas of this whole paper. So even if you sit down and write your 3 case studies separately, you want to make sure that you're bookending them with a really strong introduction and a really strong conclusion to tie it all together and make this one cohesive paper. So in your conclusion, consider overall how Schaefer is a useful tool for understanding or for looking at art from a Christian perspective. So again, we talked about those 7 unique sources. Your paper must include a works cited bibliography section. and you can look at the style guides for instructions on citing your sources. You must also include in-text citations for all information directly quoted or paraphrased. Remember, when in doubt, cite. Use footnotes or endnotes accordingly. This tells your reader where specifically the information in your paper is coming from. Okay, no first-person narrative voice except in the personal reflection section. This is why I think it's a good idea to give subtitles to each individual section of your case studies, because it helps your reader, to understand why you're switching narrative voice, all that good stuff. And last but certainly not least, proofread your paper for grammar, formatting, spelling errors before submitting. We're an upper division class. We're nearly a 400 level class, right? If you struggle with writing papers, you may want to consider submitting your paper first to Smart Thinking before submitting it for a grade. You can find the link to Smart Thinking by going into Blackboard and selecting the Tutoring Online tab. So that is found here in under this portion of your menu, this Tutoring Online tab. You can click there. So that is what we have going on for this paper. If you finish it early and want to submit it, and then, I'm all about that. If you want to submit a rough draft to me, an outline to me, I am all about that. I am more than happy to help you walk through this paper. I'm a resource for you. I can't, just check up on each one of you individually and ask how you're doing and, see if you need help with your paper, but I am here if you need that. So use me as that resource. You also want to make sure that you download the rubric for this assignment, because that's going to tell you how I'm going to score this and break it down and make sure you're covering all of your bases. So all of that, the rubric and that PDF, are all found in the Week 8 learning activities. Again, all you have due this week is that discussion board, so I expect you to really get going on those capstone projects this week. Any questions about anything thus far, don't hesitate to ask me. Don't forget, we have that extra credit assignment is due by the end of this week as well if you choose to do it. And have a really great week, everyone.